We got a different video today. We're not going to be talking about gameplay or anything. We're going to be talking about data. What we're going to be looking at right now is a behind the scenes look of the Nationals 2024 data. So if you go to Land of Redemption, you can go to the articles, or you can go to Nationals 2024, and there's going to be a list of all the deck lists there's 58 deck lists. If you want to go look at them, you can just click the plus button, and you can see the deck list and download it for a Lackey compatible file. You want to play this deck or anything like that. And then there's a little link right here. If we click that, it's going to go to a dashboard. And it's a little funky right now, I know, because of, I'm going to try to make it look nicer, but the idea is you can interact with this dashboard and hover over things. You can figure out what's going on here. And in this little tab up here, you can see the different views. So if we want to see the defense breakdown, you can go here and we see that 36% of decks at Nationals were Harrods, 6% were Thieves, and stuff like that. You have a little chart here with shows the win percentages of the decks. Black Gray doing pretty well. Pale Green not doing so well. Another picture that can help us understand what's going on is this soul differential graph here. I'll just pull it up in a different UI since it'll be easier to see. So each round you either win or you lose, right? But there's also another secondary thing that happens is you get to show your soul differential. And so the best soul differential you can have for a round is +5. So in theory, the higher your soul differential is, the more you're winning, or the more you're winning by. So we take all the different archetypes and we break them out by, and then we graph the soul differential, and we see Gray has a -30 soul differential. So it's hard to say like how detrimental that is. I guess maybe what I should do, cool thing about, I'm in Tableau right now, and Tableau is a dashboard building tool. What I can do is I can go and grab some fields. So let's see, would like to see how many games were played. So let me just put that there, put that as a count. No, some would be great. So yeah, some, and let's put it in the tooltip. Now that we hover over it, we can see in games played 35 games. So across 35 games, negative soul differential of 30. So let's go to Harrods. Across 147 games, I have a positive soul differential 49. So Harrods definitely crushing it. But soul differential isn't everything, right? We saw that Black Gray had a better win percentage, even though they had a lower soul differential. So the games might be a little bit closer with Black Gray, but this indicates Black Gray might have a easier time of closing out the game. So that's like interesting little insight here. Let's take a look at that same graph. Soul differential offense. I guess let's break down the offenses first. So we saw Clay use 37% of the meta was Clay decks. Nativity decks were 9 or 15%. Music leader type decks were 12%. Then you have all sorts of other decks making up down here. So Clay was like almost the majority. If you just pile Clay and Nativity together, they make over half the field, looks like. And if you're wondering how I categorize these decks, if we go back to here, so obviously this deck is Nativity, this deck right here is Clay, and how I categorize the decks is right here. So if we're looking at Luke Marshall's deck, you saw I categorize them as Clay Harrods. And so there's some subjectivity here, but I tried to be as objective as possible. For some of these music leader decks, it's kind of hard to lump them into one category, but I thought it was fair they all rely on music leaders. Wait, does this one even play music leader? I thought there was a music leader in here somewhere. Are we blind? Okay, well, whoops. I thought there was yeah, anyways, I tried to do my best with the labeling. Maybe one got away here, but we can fix that later. And I'll show you a little more behind the scenes later, but to how to fix that. But so yeah, so that's the meta. It's dominated by Gospel of Christ stuff. Now let's take a look at that soul differential. Wait, no, off at the win percentage. So that Daniel across 14 games, we saw 67% win rate. Nativity followed 63 games, so maybe 3 times the number of games, but a slightly lower win percentage. The Priest deck, I'll show you what deck that was. It was this offense. They had a bunch of Priest plus Matthew. I didn't want to call it a Clay deck because it felt pretty different than the other Clay decks that we're seeing. So I felt like it was fair to give it its own category. So if you see Priest, that's this type of deck. This deck won teams. So there's something there. Small sample size, same number as Daniel, because there were 2 Priest decks and there were 2 Daniel decks. There's one red deck. He won 60% of his games. The clay decks, they got 55% win rate across 154 games. And then Honeypot and Music Leader, oh no, he didn't do so well. Okay, let's take a look at that solo differential graph. Clay is, there's a strong argument to be made about Clay. When it wins games, it just wins games. And that makes sense, right? Because Matthew is attacking. And if they get a good Matthew draw, it's really easy to snowball. So when Matthew wins, they win by a lot. But maybe they don't win as consistently as Nativity does. Nativity maybe doesn't win by as much as Matthew decks, but maybe it wins a little bit more consistently. Music Leader decks, man. I don't know what's going on with them. They're falling flat right now. So here's another graph that we can take a look at. This is the card set distribution. So of all the cards that were registered in Nationals, we saw 38% of them be Gospel of Christ. Ooh. So that's like 4 out of every 10 cards are Gospel of Christ cards. And I think this number isn't precise. Basically, some of the cards I put as promos, like for example, I think I put Grapes of Wrath as a promo when it could have been counted as a Gospel of Christ cards. For some of these cards, it was difficult to determine what version to use for these. I just kind of decided randomly which one to use. So that could it could tweak these numbers a little bit too. But these are mostly accurate for the most part. So after Gospel of Christ, we saw Prophecies of Christ with 9.1%, promo cards at 8.63, and Roots was 6.07. These fundraiser cards, these were exclusively Three Woes, Son of God, and Three Woes and Second Coming. So Three Woes and Second Coming made up around 5% of the cards that were registered. All right, let's move on. So this one's a fun little chart. It's called the M count. M count distribution. So what is M count? M count is the average number of cards Matthew would draw on turn 1 against each of these decks sorted by rank. So let me just translate that for you a little bit. So we have all these decks sorted from first place to last place. So for example, first place is my Nativity Heroes deck. And then each deck has a win percentage, which is the percentage you'll see up there this is the win percentages of each round. There's 7 rounds before going to top 8. So these win percentages aren't accounting for top 8. And then each of these decks has an M count. And an M count is is a cool thing that I made. Basically, I created a simulation of redemption. And what I would do is I would simulate redemption and draw 8 cards. And then I would pretend opponent was attacking me with a Matthew. So Matthew would attack, reveal my hand, and however many brigades there were in that hand, that's how many cards Matthew would draw. And so that was one simulation, and then I'd run that simulation like 10,000 times or 20,000 or 100,000 times. And I did that for each of these decks here. And that's what the M count is. It's the average number of cards Matthew would draw against this specific list of cards that was registered across X games. So I can talk more about the simulation in the second half of the video where I get into the code of this. But basically, the lower your M count is, so like this deck, let's take a look at Nat Cooper Noise Arid Gold deck. And let's just check our common sense. So if we're looking at this deck, we see that it has a lot of gold brigade cards. The offense is mostly mono brigade and the defense is mostly mono brigade. So if Matthew attacks, we're expecting maybe most of the time it's going to be drawing 2 cards, but then there's a chance to draw more if Matthew sees like this card in there, or if Matthew sees this card in there. That's why the M count is so low for this deck. It has a 2.68 M count. So that makes sense, right? And now for decks like up here, what's the M count is 8.82. So that means on average, Matthew would attack and would draw 8 cards. All right, let's take a look at why this particular deck might have fallen into such a trap. All right, the defense looks a little splashy here. We have Foreign Wise, we have the Kings of the Earth, we have Pagan Sailors, we have this, and we have New Jerusalem and Dragon Raid. Yeah, I think it makes sense why the M count's so high. I think the data is a little skewed because in theory, it's possible to reveal New Jerusalem and a multicolor evil card, and they like draw up to hand size. They're not actually like drawing 12 cards, if they have 5 cards in hand. So maybe I need to go back and tweak the code to turn this number down a little bit to be more accurate. And this program also takes into account some of the nuance of redemption. So for example, the Crowd's Lost Soul, if you're playing that, I am accounting for the scenarios where you have Crowd's Lost Soul in play on turn 1, and then your opponent doesn't have an answer to your Crowd's Lost Soul. And so I just kind of estimated what percentage of time Matthew decks would have an answer to Crowds. And so if there was a Crowds on turn 1, I would just do a random check to see if Crowds would work. And so if your deck has Crowds also, your M count's going to be lower than if it didn't. What else did I account for? if you were playing Lawless, I would have Lawless trigger and find the Evil Brigade card with the least amount of colors. So just kind of little optimizations like that. I'm not sure if I programmed Grumbled and Shepherds to underdeck the most brigades cards in hand. But anyways, I digress. And so we can see this line. This is the average plot. And we see in general, the lower your M count is, the higher your score will be. And I guess that makes sense, right? Because Matthew's so prevalent in the meta, the less cards your opponent will be drawing off of Matthew, the better off you'll probably be doing. But there are exceptions. Luke Marshall, for example, had a 92% win rate in the 7 rounds, and he had an M count of 7.2. So let's take a look at Luke's deck. Why is the M count so high? He has a lot of splashy stuff. He has Ends of the Earth. He has Foreign Wives. That's probably why, just because of Ends of the Earth and Foreign Wives. And those are really important cards, and I'm sure he got a lot of blocks with Ends of the Earth, a lot of blocks with Foreign Wives and a lot of value with Ends of the Earth, but the Matthew Mirror could have been difficult. All right. So the average M count is 8.39. So out of all these decks, the average number of cards Matthew would draw is about 5. If you're playing a Matthew deck and you were going to this Nationals, you attacked with Matthew on turn 1, you'd expect to draw about 5 cards. Maybe let's do the median, because that might be a little bit representative. The median's 4.7. I don't know, because you're probably not going to be facing these type of decks. Most of the decks are in here. So the median's like 4.7. All right, let's keep going. Where are we now? Card type distribution. So out of all the cards that were registered, we had 17% of them are heroes, 15% good enhancements, 13% evil characters, and bloody blah. I don't know if this is super interesting or anything, but it does help us understand the most popular card types, most important card types. All right, popular dominance. This is maybe a little bit more informative. Son of God is 57 out of 58 decks playing this, and the 58th deck was running Chariot of Fire. Second Coming, I wish it. Okay, yep, 54%. I would have expected this to be 58. But I guess some people don't own their Second Coming yet. That's okay. 3 woes. So the top 3 dominants are as we expected. Crouch Choice is very popular. Almost half the decks running it. Glory of the Road equally popular. You know, if I would have suspected, I would have imagined this would be a little bit more popular than Crouch Choice. And surprising that the Resurrection wasn't the 4th most played. Good it is. John Hendricks, if you're watching, 3 people registered Guardian of Your Souls. So, anyway, Lost Souls, the most popular one was Distressed and Humble and Lost Souls. So it looks like those are all equally represented, which is good because those are probably the 3 best Lost Souls in the game. Where's Hopper? 29. More decks should be running Hopper. Why are only half the decks in the tournament running Hopper? I don't understand that. I feel like this number should be higher because more decks registered Meek Lost Souls. I'll have to double check the data on that. It's like we have one deck here, it's running 7 Meeks. And then we have another deck down here, it's also running 7 Meeks. So I got to figure out why there are only 9 of these showing up. Do a little quick inspection of that data here. Okay, I think I know what happened. I think instead of counting all I know exactly what happened now. So this only counted that there were 8 decks running this Meek Lost Soul, when in reality it should have counted the number as opposed to just how many decks were running. And that works for all the rest because there's only 1 copy of Distress in each of these. But if there are multiple copies of Distress, then this would have I probably would have noticed this a lot sooner. So I can fix that. So that would probably mean this Lost Soul is going to be the most played Lost Soul. So I don't think that changes much, but just interesting to catch right now. Let's look at the most popular heroes. Matthew the Publican. Who would have guessed? 26 decks out of 58 were running Matthew. John the Fisherman, his bro, 24. Angel of the Winds. So yeah, just Gospel of Christ was so well represented. So it's no surprise there. Mary Holy Virgin, there she is. She's coming up in this world. Let's see, anybody else that we're maybe not expecting? Nativity. Let's see, what's the most popular non-Gospel of Christ hero besides Angel of the Winds? That doesn't count. Is it David? Might be just David. Oh. All right, evil characters, Deceiver, no surprise there. Everyone loves the Deceiver and the Herods. Everyone's loving these Herods, man. And Judas coming in hot, but some decks are just running him as a hero, right? So Tarsus very popular. Yeah, basically it's just like Herod dominated defense. Good enhancements. Let's just go through this quickly. Lost Child Found. Lost Child Found beats out Authority of Christ. Wow. Every white deck. Basically, if you're playing white, you should play this card, maybe. Yup. Look at all this Gospel of Christ stuff. I don't know if I'm looking for anything in specific right now. We're just kind of noticing trends. It's just like Herods are good, yeah. Born horses, contagious fear delivered, feudal inquisition, yeah. Yeah, straw, duplicity. These are, what's the theme here? These are all Herod cards. All right, what are the most popular cards in the reserve? You will remain most popular, followed by Eternal Inheritance, Foreign Horses, and the Helper, Foreign Wives, Herod's Executioners, Unsuccessful, I shall found. So if you're just playing Redemption, these are all cards you need to be aware of that can get in the reserve. So yeah, we're seeing 8 decks are running Reserve Mary. So that if I calculated heroes across reserve and main deck, Mary would have probably shot up at 8. She probably would have gone maybe top 4. 5. Okay, is there anything else I want to talk about? Go to the data. I know it's boring, but basically I have 2 tables. I have a deck table and a cards table. The deck list table contains the metadata about each deck. So for example, it has a player name, the M count, has what place it is, tags it with the offense and defense, shows the soul differential, and also tracks the round scores, again, their opponents. So very nice, and shows their win percentage and the games they played. That's that table. And so this is a primary key, and it's also a foreign keys. So that links it to this table, cards.csv. And so the card, basically I take the player name and then I put the file name, or put the card name in there, and that creates the unique ID for this column. And so that way I can keep track of every single card that was registered and have it be unique for each player. So even though like maybe a couple people played Blood of the Lamb, we're going to have multiple Blood of the Lamb cards because multiple people ran that. So yeah, yeah. And how did we get all this data? Well, that's where the code comes in. What I do during my day job is I'm a data engineer, and I kind of work with stuff like this. So I use Python. So we did, here's the raw data. It's all the Lackey deck lists that you saw in Land of Redemption. They look like this. They don't have a lot of stuff. They just have the card names. So I take that and then I map it to a carddata.txt. And basically it's like a big tab separated file that has the name, the set, it has all this other metadata about the card. So I just look up the card by its unique name, which I think is this, and then I'm able to put that in a table. Then the pairing CSV I got from the Judge Red Dragonthorn. I was able to take this, and then that's how I created had to clean it up a little bit. But that's how I got that. Let's see. Is there anything in particular that stands out here? The too fancier thing. Oh yeah. So for the M count thing, the M count was a project I had worked on very early this year. One of my very first, it actually is my very first YouTube video, is actually talking about that project. And so I already had that code working, and it was just been kind of sitting, waiting for its time to shine. So I was basically able to just copy that code, put it in here, and wrap it in a nice function. So basically what this does, it takes a deck list, it runs 100,000 simulations. It says 60% of the time the crowd's lost soul. If it's in play, it's not going to work. And 15% of the time, opponents can't put a Matthew into play on turn 1. So those are like the parameters of the simulation, and it's going to spit out a result that we can store as the M count, wherever that is. Where did I put M count? There it is, simulations.mcount. Yep, perfect. So that's how we get an M count. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward besides that. For a little, the text data isn't the most perfect thing. So for some cards, we have to explicitly code exceptions that we can't really deal with otherwise. So there might be discrepancies, little tiny discrepancies in the data. Anything else I want to talk about? So this process of getting all these deck lists into this dashboard is like a culmination of a lot of things. First, I had to, let's see, what did I have to do? Firstly, I had to go look at all the deck lists, go through each one of them and put them all into Lackey card by card. And there were 58 deck lists, and some of them were hard to read. Like, let's see, some of them were upside down, some of them, there's Jay Chambers. Yeah, it was fun though. Got really good at doing it really fast at putting in Lackey deck lists. But yeah, this one was the hardest one. I was just like, what's going on here? So yeah, I had to do that. And once I got them all in Lackey, I had to take screenshots of all of them. And I can't just take one screenshot. I have to take 2, because the first screenshot is this screen. Second screenshot is this screen. To splice them together, print it out. Then I have to go on Land of Redemption, and I'm an editor, so I can click the edit button. Basically, I have to draw drop all this in by hand too. So basically what I'm trying to say, it's a lot of work, but because it's nationals, this only happens once a year. If this was happening every week, it would not be sustainable. I definitely want to keep doing this. I'm trying to think of how we can get more deck lists, more data, because I want Land of Redemption to be like the hub people go to for deck lists. That's why there's this new button. So now you can easily access the nationals data, but you can also easily access the other deck lists that have been published here. But yeah, I just want this to be the hotspot. If people want to look at a deck list, they can come here and check it out. And so maybe I was thinking maybe I could figure out how to sponsor people in their tournaments. Like if they send me their deck list results, I could send them packs or promo cards or something. That sounds expensive. So I'm not going to go all in on that right now, maybe, but something I'm considering. I'm trying to figure out how I could make this process a little easier. Like, is there any way I can automatically generate the screenshot? Is there any way I can automatically create like a dashboard for each tournament? I think this could be reused, maybe. All of it. I don't know if I'm going to have the pairings for each person, for each tournament. As long as I get the Lackey deck list, I could just shove them in here, about some new tables and plug those into Tableau and create more dashboards. But I don't know how insightful that the dashboard's going to be for only 16 people tournaments. Maybe this use the dashboard for bigger tournaments, but maybe for smaller tournaments, what I can try to do is just publish each list on Land of Redemption, something like this. Anyways, enough rambling for now. There's little behind the scenes curtains of what it takes to make an article like this. But before I sign off here, this is something I'm proud of, so I'd like to talk about it a little bit more. It is the MCount simulation, and I'll just give you a high level helicopter view of what's going in. First, I take that raw deck list file, so I have to load it into a deck object. Once it's loaded in there, I can do a bunch of fun things with it. For example, I can just call the deck.shuffle method or deck.reset. And that's the power of making classes. So I made a bunch of classes where I could draw cards, bottom cards from decks, just do a bunch of things that would be useful in a game of Redemption. Even programmed the Virgin Birth in here. But yeah, nothing too crazy for these zones. Anyways, once we kind of loaded them in that object, it's pretty easy to manipulate the state now. Because now I can just, if I need to draw cards, I can go like my deck dot draw in cards. And I add some basic logic for resolving Virgin Birth here, which grabs the lowest. Looks like you're just grabbing a Rand card. And I play Lost Souls into the territory. And each of these is like a different zone. So like there's a hand zone and a territory zone and a deck zone. I can manipulate those by calling the dot add and dot remove method that I made, which kind of moves these cards around these different zones. And then adding edge cases for resolving different types of lost souls. Calculate Matthew count, which is M count. So first we're detecting if they fizzle, which will fizzle 15% of the time based upon the parameters I'd set. And then we check if they have crowds, and if crowds is going to be effective or not. Then if that doesn't happen, then we check how many brigades are in hand, which is a simple calculation. Just counts up the number of brigades in the hand. And so at the end of a turn, we have like a bunch of metadata, and we write all that metadata to a file. And the file will look something like this. So this is however many simulations we're doing, and we're just calculating the number of cards Matthew drew. So for the first game, Matthew drew 4. In the second game, Matthew drew 6. And I guess he drew 0 here because he maybe didn't, they whiffed or they had crowds or something. And so then that happens, however many times. And then we count up the average of that and spit it out as the M count. And you can build this program to also calculate the percentages of how often would you be able to draw with Denarius, or how often would you draw with 4 drachma coin. But that's not super valuable information right now. And how often would you whiff on heroes, which might be interesting. So maybe I can add that later. But anyways, last thing we wanted to do was correct the deck that we saw. That was not a music leader deck. So need to figure out where it is. I think it was 30th place. So we need to figure out what to call this deck. It is Zacchaeus, David, Moses, Jarius. I don't know what to call this deck. It's primarily gold based. It's gold green and with David. What do I do? What do I call this deck? Moses? Turbo Moses? Turbo Faith Moses? There's some musician theme. can David's harp. Whatever we call it, we can't call it music. So I don't know. I don't know how to categorize that. I'm just gonna call it miscellaneous and then rerun everything. Also regenerate the file, rerun simulation. I guess we don't need to rerun all the simulation stuff, but I'll regenerate the new file, which can help me load the data back into Tableau. All right, that's a little bit behind the scenes if you're interested. Bye.